Hey,
Hey,
Fabricators!
fabricators.
Welcome to the place where we like to talk about all things Microsoft Fabric.
Yep, and if you're new here or you like these videos, don't forget to like and subscribe. Really helps us out.
This episode is our Fab 5 for March, where we take our top 5 highlights from the March Fabric release notes.
Yeah, and this is an extra special one. So in case you have been living under a rock in the Fabric world, we have had FABCON and SQLCon in Atlanta in March. So all of the big announcements are essentially everything that's coming out of there. So we want to touch on those 5 announcements that are what we think is most important or most interesting. And we've maybe got a couple on the side that we'll cover at the end as well.
Cool. Should we jump in?
Yeah, sounds good.
So at number 5, we have got Fabric Skills. So I particularly wanted to include this in our top 5 in a world of using AI agents and AI coding assistants. This to me just looked like a way where we can vibe code our Fabric implementations. Shall we take a look at some of the footage from the keynote?
Yeah, let's.
So Joanna, we are going to talk about how you build Fabric implementations, Fabric projects in a completely different way.
Absolutely. I'm super excited to announce here at FABCON today Skills for Fabric. So Skills for Fabric are basically an open source plugin for the GitHub Copilot CLI. And it basically enables you to build out your entire Fabric data platform using Copilot. How awesome is that, Amir?
Yeah. So this is what you're seeing here. This is the GitHub view, right?
Yeah, this is the GitHub view. You have an authoring skills, you have consumption skills, and you have skills for all the workloads in Fabric. So you can build out skills for data engineering, my favorite workload, data warehouse. You can build out skills for real-time intelligence just through a prompt.
So really, the agent is now having all the knowledge that it needs in order to build complete applications from scratch. And you can actually tell the agent what is the project that you want to build, and it will build it for you.
Absolutely. You can tell it, hey, build me out a medallion architecture, and it will go do it for you. Okay, check this out. So I'm giving Copilot one simple mission. Build me out an ingestion engine, clean my ticket data, and prep me a silver layer. Look at it go over here. On the right-hand side, you have my Fabric workspace, and check this out. You can see new artifacts being populated live here. So you've got the environment artifact, you've got the lakehouse artifact that's being provisioned, and in a second, you'll see this notebook that's just been provisioned all through a prompt.
So the agent just does everything for you. It's not just provision, it's actually populating the content. It's writing Python code inside the notebook, right? It's actually creates like how we write shortcuts for you.
Exactly. We've gone from prompt engineering to intent-based engineering.
And you can see here on the side, on the Copilot side, it just explains what it builds, why it builds, what skills it uses, and so forth.
Yeah, and which best practices it applied as well. It's giving me a full summary of everything that it's done.
Cool. So what did you think?
Yeah, so I deliberately kind of avoided this one because I know you wanted to talk about it and you kind of had this one queued up. And I had a little sneak peek before we talked about it. And honestly, like, it sounds great, it sounds brilliant, but it just feels like another one of these situations of like, you're hiding everything behind the curtain of like, look how easy this is, look how simple it is, like, yeah, anybody can do this. When in reality, there's going to be specific use cases, there's going to be specific scenarios where this is really valuable, and then there's going to be a whole wealth of other scenarios where it's not going to be as useful, it's not going to fit what people need, or people are going to assume that they can just replace whole teams with this. I don't want to go down the route of like the usual kind of like AI is replacing everybody here, or AI isn't replacing everyone with regards to this, but I mean, it sounds good, might be useful for smaller organizations that have simpler architectures that they can just, that they can get started. You can POC things easily enough, but I don't know if it's really going to have that kind of wider impact. So like
you say, it sounds good. It looks spectacular on the demo. It's like, oh, look, I just give it a prompt and it builds my whole architecture for you. Obviously, that's a pre-recorded demo. It'd be interesting to see how it fares. I guess in terms of the idea behind the skills themselves. So it's not actually a feature that's in Fabric. It's a GitHub repo with those kind of AI skills defined. And theoretically, those skills should give you the right guardrails to make sure it's going to build things properly. So, yeah, in the age of vibe coding, it looks good. It looks promising. It looks exciting, but the proof will ultimately be in the pudding and seeing how people get on when they actually use it.
And at number 4, we have branched workspaces. So this was one that I wanted to include, just mainly because this has been a bit of a pain point so far. It's been something that's hard to establish how you work within Fabric. Obviously, you've got one kind of shared environment, you've got workspaces, and we've had that kind of branching where you could create a separate workspace and connect that to a specific branch in your Git repo, but it just wasn't really smooth enough. And this branched workspace is really like refining that process, bringing it in under the parent workspace. You've now got the ability, there's some additional features under there as well that I'm really interested in. So let's have a look at the announcement and then we can have a chat about it afterwards.
Cool.
So enough of all this talking. You know what I like to do? Let's head over to my laptop. All right, Amir, welcome to the Dev Workspace, the communal fridge of data engineering. Everything is created here, and sometimes, occasionally, someone will delete your lakehouse like leftover sushi. Right? We don't like leftover sushi. And so, as you can see here, I need to get to work, Amir. I need to add some variables. I want to make my lakehouse more dynamic.
See, I'd never leave sushi.
What I'm going to do is branch, but I'm going to do something that Adam and Martha, they don't do. I'm going to create an isolated workspace. I'm not going to wreak havoc on our development.
That's good. That's really. Now, creating a branch and actually provisioning everything in the branch can take minutes because you can have hundreds of items in there, right?
I don't need to do that anymore, Amir. Stepped up my game. I got selective branching. So I'm only going to choose what I need. I'm just going to choose my lakehouse, my variable library, less moving, less copying, more doing stuff. I got a lot of stuff to do. I'm a busy person, right? And so in just a few clicks, I'm going to automatically create a branch and a workspace, and I give them the same name because I'm really strict about my naming conventions. Okay, but if you look at the top, I've gotten mature over the years, and so I need to know where I come from, and this little breadcrumb.
But not only the top, I love that hierarchical
beautiful parent, children, kind of like Thanksgiving.
Classic Patrick.
Yeah, I wasn't quite sure about the fridge analogy, but yeah, what are we thinking? I mean, so we didn't include it in the clip, but before going into this demo, one of the points that Amir made during the keynote was that the community's been screaming out for improvements on CI/CD.
Yes,
this is definitely a step in that right direction. I think the improvements they've made, because I think that branch workspace feature isn't new per se, but the way it's going to work going forward is going to be new. Selective branching, so you only need to bring in the artifacts that you need rather than the whole shebang, feels like a really good productivity gain, and it's going to help speed things up. I wonder whether or not it will be able to automatically detect dependencies, because I can see a scenario where I'm like, oh, I'll select these 3 things, then I'll go off to do my development work and then be like, oh no, I forgot that thing needed upstream. So it'll be interesting.
That's the thing. That's the thing I was worried about. So the documentation does say that it automatically detects dependencies, but like you say, what does that really mean? Like, if we've created something in a notebook and we've got a pipeline that's calling that notebook or calling like a dynamic variable that comes from a metadata database or something like that, is it gonna, when you pull over all those components, is it gonna know that notebook's in there? Probably not. So for me, I feel like there's a little bit of a risk here of like, you've got developers that might pull over as much as they're aware of and miss components, and then when they're running through pipelines and they're trying to test whatever they've changed or whatever they've updated, they're going to hit errors where things are going to be missing and things like that. So call me doom and gloom. I don't know if that's potentially where, when we talked about workspace strategies, for example, potentially where that helps or maybe even hinders. Like if you think about the multiple components we'd have separated out over multiple workspaces, does that create more issues? I mean, if we think about the approach, one of the approaches that I talked about where we have a single workspace for engineering components, then you're all in here. If I was developing on that, I would just bring through all the notebooks, I would bring through the all the components in there. There's no point in really separating it out unless there's distinct differences that are going to be obvious. But where people have got everything in one workspace, or maybe they've got things spread over multiple workspaces, it starts to get a little bit more interesting. So I think there's going to be some things to consider there, definitely.
Yeah, I think part of my beef with the whole CI/CD story in Fabric is partly the fact that it's so evolving. I think they were probably, so the original iteration of branched workspaces was announced at FABCON 2 years ago.
Yeah.
And then 2 years down the line, they're kind of admitting, oh yeah, that's not quite working. We've made some changes. That parent-child hierarchy looks like a nice little feature, as well as that selective branching.
Yeah.
But also, if I was somebody who CI/CD was important to me and I've been using Fabric for a while, I've probably gone off and built something custom or built something using the CI/CD Python package that we've talked about previously. And then this comes along and it's like, oh, what do I do? Do I stick? Do I twist? Should I move? So even though the CI/CD features look to be improving and evolving, I don't think that necessarily means that people should be starting again from scratch and throwing away. If they've already got well-established life cycle ideas and ways of working, they should definitely just probably stick with what they're doing. If it was a greenfield site, though, if I was going in and starting brand new from scratch, and especially if I was working with a team that were perhaps a little bit less mature on the CI/CD front, then I could see this being a good way forward. So at number 3, we have got MLVs, or Materialized Lake Views. So we haven't got any video footage to share for this particular feature. It was only really a bit of a passing mention in the keynote. But they did sort of share this slide, which was basically the main headline was kind of the fact that Materialized Lake Views are now generally available. The fact that it's a GA announcement doesn't really sound all that exciting, but what they've gone on to say is that, and with them pushing it GA, they've started to lift some of the limitations that were there during the preview version. So if you're not familiar with MLVs, it's kind of like a more declarative SQL way of creating materialized tables in your lakehouse. When we did Fabric February and we did our little interviews and we spoke to Johan, and he sort of said, oh yeah, he's using Materialized Lake Views. He highly recommends them, that they're not, they're still in preview, but you should use them. They're now no longer in preview, and amongst the things that they've sort of managed to lift in terms of those limitations. So previously, if your SQL definition contained things like left joins or things like group by statements, then that kind of automated DAG and that kind of dependent refresh of related things wouldn't work. So first of all, they've lifted that as a limitation, which is pretty awesome. Because they'd have been pretty useless without that, to be fair. The other thing that they're doing is that you always define these using SQL in your notebooks previously, and they have introduced now a preview feature, which is to basically give you the Python version of this as well, which I see the potential for that to be really, really powerful, because if you can build these out using Python, you can probably start to make them a lot more sort of metadata driven and sort of a bit more dynamic in terms of building themselves, as opposed to sort of more having to hand crank your SQL. So I'm excited by this. For me, it's almost a bit, for anyone who's familiar with DBT, I'm a bit of a DBT fanboy. And this is kind of like almost the Fabric version of DBT inside of it. So yeah, any thoughts, Craig?
Yeah, so with this one, I think honestly, like I've used it a little bit so far, and I'm starting to go like a little bit like, why would I not just use this everywhere? Like, it seems great, the fact that we can build those dependencies, and when tables are refreshed, it just automatically refreshes the views and everything. Sounds like a no-brainer for kind of setting up a very simple, quick medallion architecture. And I think that's where the bit is. It's like, where's the actual use cases for this? And when you look at the documentation, it talks about not using it for streaming data. It talks about don't use it for simple transformations or any rarely accessed queries. And that starts to lead me down the path of this isn't as fast, or it isn't as necessarily cost efficient as just loading things into tables and presenting it that way. It does talk about where you've got queries that are complex. It does say use them for medallion architecture and things like that. So I think for now, like, I'm probably leaning on them quite heavily when I'm building out a medallion architecture. I'm bringing things through bronze, silver, and then as I'm going into gold, I'm joining a couple of source tables together. I'm doing some transformations, and I've maybe leaned on views in the past anyway to kind of be that initial like frame for what I'm creating the tables from. So I'm leaning on lake views for that, the materialized lake views for that, where I can basically just have this kind of predefined SQL statement that creates the gold tables that I need to start building the semantic layer. As you said, you got PySpark in preview, which will be interesting where that goes and what you can actually do with it. At number 2 is Database Hub, and this is probably more leaning towards the FABCON type announcements, but the fact that it was all just one big conference, I think it's valid here, and it kind of pulls away from what I would call the more traditional Fabric announcements, which I'll talk a bit about after we watch the announcement video.
What you're looking at is the brand new Databases Hub in Fabric, a single pane of glass for all your databases. No migrations needed. We're bringing these agents, all this intelligence, observability, governance, and more directly to you. From a full estate overview for all your databases, no matter where they live, to a health overview, alerts, insights, configurable charts and dashboards, even the ability to deploy your databases wherever they live. But let's start at the top. I have databases across the entire estate, on premises, IaaS, PaaS, and now I have a single pane of glass, the first time ever where I can see them, no matter if they're coming from Microsoft or even other vendors. But I also see 7 things that need my attention right now. And the best part about this is the first time I know exactly where I need to act, and I have everything centralized for me. But it gets better. I can see my security, my whole posture, I can see my compliance, and I can even see my resource utilization. And this is going to unlock countless optimization opportunities. Now, what I love about this is it's not just about the insights, it's about the action. And these alerts are centralized again across my entire estate. So for this particular one, this can run autonomously or configured by me, but it's telling me something I already knew, but it's finally nice to have this insight in a single pane of glass.
So I think let's start off with the fact that there should be a swear jar in Microsoft for anyone that says the single pane of glass. Honestly. The main reason, so I want to get your thoughts in a second, but the main reason I highlighted this one was because this feels like another, like it started with Fabric databases, and this feels like another piece that starts to kind of go, Fabric is not an analytics platform. This feels like Microsoft kind of shifting the story so that you're going to be working inside Fabric, whether you're just looking and monitoring SQL databases. There's another concern here, not so much a concern, but Microsoft doing the typical thing of all of these third-party companies where you've got like SolarWinds and Redgate that have this tooling, and Microsoft are basically saying, oh, that's great, we'll just copy this and create our own version. So there's a little bit of market threat there. But the fact that they're kind of moving more into this operational side, I feel like, and I'll make a prediction here, I feel like in 5 years' time, or maybe even less than that, we're going to have Fabric established as a sort of Azure platform. Everything is going to be Fabric something. Everything data related is going to be inside Fabric, whether you like it or not. So what do you think of this one, having a look at the video and a little look beforehand?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. Like, as we filmed this, obviously we made some notes in terms of which features we wanted to share, but other than that, we've not pre-rehearsed what we're going to say. And I was going to make exactly the same point. It feels as though the kind of lines between operational and analytical workloads is starting to blur. And if I'm being honest, I don't even think that is just a Fabric thing. I think that's happening across the industry, and that's happening with other products that are out there as well. And at number 1, we have got planning, which sounds really dull. But for me, this like has a little bit of personal significance to an extent, I guess. So my data career started off working in a finance department, and I used to have to look after the company I worked at's enterprise performance management software. So at the time, that was using a product called TM1, which eventually got bought out by Cognos and then IBM. I also went through a phase where I used to use SAP BPM as well, which is another sort of enterprise performance management software. I know I've never used this, but there's a product called Anaplan, which is like one of the leaders in that sort of area these days. And I can't remember that Microsoft have ever had a category of software that covers this. And now, as part of Fabric, they have announced it. So let's go check out the footage from the keynote.
Nice.
Let's take a look, right? So I'm going to take us back to the world of beverages. Let's say I'm a sales lead and I need to think about those drinks and brands that are going to go into the freestyle machines that you're going to enjoy soon. I'm creating a revenue plan just in a few clicks, right? It's like any other Fabric item in that new item pane. Give it a name, give it a description, and we'll go from there. And here's where the one-like integration comes in. I'm bringing in my actuals, my prior data from a semantic model. And so that has brand categories going down here, and it has time going across the right for all my quarters. We start there, right, in the past, and our plan is informed by that. So I'm going to wipe away or hide the 2025 numbers and look to 2026. And I can start applying growth percentages here, right, to specific brands, to specific categories of brands, and you'll see that they propagate down, they propagate across, and they also roll back up to the high-level planning number. I don't have to do anything.
I love how easy it is to make the changes. Use a 7%, it just changes all the numbers, allocate them accordingly. Beautiful.
Exactly. So I can play around, do all my experimentation, and then when I'm satisfied, I can lock that up and say, hey, I've set some growth targets. Let's put this in for my, cosmic craft brews, and then close these out for now, right, and keep those stable while we continue to change other numbers in our revenue plan. And so once I do that, you'll notice that the changes that I apply don't touch what I've already locked, right? Only the open categories are affected. I can tag in my teammates to take a look and go from there.
So this is a pretty collaborative environment where people can collaborate and building the plan together.
Oh yeah, and I can start controlling, right, extra custom columns or security rules. I can say who can do what. Very easy to configure all this super mature product is just built into Fabric.
Yeah, it's quite misleading. It's the first time we're introducing it, but it's incredibly mature. It has all the bells and whistles.
Yes, and we have an audit feature too, right? So after we set up those rules, we can go and see who's touched what, right? Who's had their hands in the proverbial cookie jar and make sure no one's doing anything funny with our financial plans.
This is great. So now we have all the plan and we can now store it somewhere.
Yes, so full integration, right? We started with one lake in the semantic model for our actuals or our buys. We can now take the plan and write it into one of those databases in the database hub that Charles showed you. And now we switch into this view, we see it's written there right back for us on the other side.
Yeah. So, like in the past, I think I've seen people attempt to do something like this using things like master data services on the old SQL Server. There are a couple of third-party products. So I think there's one called Power On, which was like a Power BI integration that could basically let you do some write back. So you could look at your past numbers and do some scenario planning and then project those forwards and do those as well. And there's also a product called Info River, which was like a third-party product. Yeah, so my understanding is that the folks from Info River have been heavily involved building that with Microsoft in terms of actually bringing that feature to Fabric. But yeah, what do you think, Craig? I know that I was more excited by this than you were.
I think on the notes that we made around this, the only note I left was terrible name, WTF. Honestly, for me, it feels completely kind of left field, out of nowhere. Like this, like when we're talking about the direction that Fabric's going in, it feels like they're just sticking bits on. And honestly, the last time Microsoft did that, or the last time you recognized this, it was SharePoint, and you just ended up with this smashing of stuff together that seemed to be developed by so many different teams that didn't talk to each other. But anyway, I digress. Honestly, like I'd like to hear in the comments from people that use those other products, is this something that looks like it compares? Like, is it good? Is it like a whole area that I have just not been aware of from a customer perspective? Is this like perfect? Everyone's like, finally, we've got this capability in here.
So that covers our top 5. Any honourable mentions? Like, obviously, with it being FABCON, there were like so many announcements, and we limit ourselves to just 5 that we try to go into a little bit of depth with. Anything else you want to briefly call out?
Yeah, so we never really covered this in great detail at the start, but honestly, like the 5 that we covered are interesting components, but there's nothing that's really, like, I'm going to be a little bit harsh here, there's nothing that's really been blowing the socks off me in terms of announcements. So in terms of honourable mentions, there was a little around the one security tab, not necessarily a feature. I'm trying to think what else really came up, to be honest. There was a couple
one security made me laugh, because again, I'm pretty sure one security was announced at the outset of Fabric, and they've only just gotten to the point now where they're actually pushing it live. So I think sometimes with this FABCON, and maybe to an extent a little bit of the last one as well, sometimes it's difficult to get excited about features where you think, hand on heart, as a data professional, they should have been there from day one, and they're still kind of like catching up and covering over some cracks in terms of getting up to where the platform is.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So there's an element of that to an extent. Try to think, like you say, what else was good? They've extended some of the mirroring capabilities, so you can now mirror SharePoint and Excel documents, which on the one hand feels like that'll be great. I can see people using it. On the other hand, I can see that turn into a governance nightmare. I think the thing that made me laugh when they demoed that was the use case they did was like, oh, somebody's uploaded a budget here into SharePoint, and now we can just upload that straight into the platform. And then they demoed planning, and it was like, yeah, surely you should be doing your plans using the brand new planning feature.
Yeah, is this a classic case of the Microsoft Teams being so siloed that they're not tying in with each other or not talking to each other, or different development cadences as well, I guess. But yeah, that's a good point. I'm trying to think what else there was. I don't know. Was there anything else that jumped out for you?
The only other thing that I put down, I've got 3 more things that I've written down. So again, it only got like a really brief mention. This idea of shortcut transformations. So this shortcut functionality has been in Fabric from day one, but now you'll be able to put lightweight transformations on your shortcuts as well, which could be an interesting feature. Again, I get a little bit nervous in terms of the fact that it's good to basically use a feature or a function for a particular purpose. I mean, if they start blurring the lines because people are doing transformations as part of the mirroring, yeah, that might be an interesting one. AI functions in the warehouse, something that I'm used to seeing from a Databricks background, with some of those AI functions, but they look quite interesting. So literally you can write T-SQL and then have what just looks like a scalar function that says, do sentiment analysis of this piece of text. So yeah, be interesting to see how much usage that gets. And then the last one, which I think I wrote down on our notes, but I would imagine that you'd be more excited about than me because you're more of a data engineering nerd than I am. Just the announcement that they're upgrading the Spark runtime. So they're running to Fabric. I can't remember the naming, but it was basically going to be based on Spark 4.0. Fabric runtime 2.0.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. It's a kind of pushing forward and advancement, and you've got a whole wealth of kind of functionality and stuff like that opens up under the hood. But I think for me, it's more of a, okay, like that's good you're moving forward, but that's kind of like expected cadence, expected kind of advancement rather than necessarily a new feature or something like that. But I guess if we want to explore, if anyone in the comments wants to drop, if you want to explore the new Spark runtimes and things, we can cover those off and talk about where we think the pros and cons are, or any risks and things like that for you.
Yeah, I'll let you cover that off, Craig.
Yeah,
and as always, we'll make sure that we provide links to all of the YouTube footage that we've shown. We can provide a link to the full keynote if you want to watch the entire 2 hours. And also all of the release notes and blogs that went out around FABCON as well. So that kind of wraps it up really for this Fab 5 episode.
Hope you enjoyed the video, and don't forget to like and subscribe, and keep an eye out for the next one. We'll have the news for the next month in April, and we'll be dropping some new videos talking about capacities in Fabric as well.
Awesome. Catch you in the next one.
Until the next one.